My name is Hazel Williams. I'm 28 years old, and I never imagined my own sister would be the one to break my ribs. Growing up in Ashley's shadow was hard enough. Living beneath her golden glow meant being invisible. But nothing could have prepared me for the day she hit me so hard that something inside my chest cracked. And worse than the pain? Watching my mother laugh as I gasped for air, clutching my phone to call for help. "It's just a rib," she scoffed, yanking the phone from my hands. "Don't ruin her future over nothing." My father? He didn't flinch. "Stop being dramatic," he said while I struggled to breathe. What none of them realized was that in that moment, everything shifted. That moment changed me. But before I go on, tell me where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand your ground, even when it meant standing alone. Being the middle child in our Boston suburb felt like living in the background of a family portrait. Seen, but never truly noticed. Ashley, my sister, was just 2 years older, but from the time she laced up her first pair of soccer cleats at age 4, she was the star. Local papers wrote her name like it was gospel. College scouts lined the fields. Her smile lit up every dinner table. But behind the headlines and trophies was a temper she reserved almost exclusively for me. My father, Gregory, a high-powered investment banker, worshipped her talent. He'd cancel meetings to catch her games but never once showed up to a single debate competition or art show I participated in. My mother, Pamela, former pageant queen turned socialite, built her weeks around Ashley's team fundraisers and wardrobe planning. And Tyler, our baby brother, had the usual privileges that came with being the youngest. No one questioned him. He coasted on cuteness. Then there was me, Hazel. The responsible one. The steady one. The girl who didn't need as much. That's what my father always said. When he remembered I was in the room. The first time Ashley hurt me physically, I was 7. She was 9. I had borrowed her colored pencils because mine had snapped. She shoved me so hard into my desk I had a bruise on my back for weeks. When I showed my mother, her only response was, "Well, you should have asked. Ashley works very hard on her art projects." That was the beginning of the pattern. Ashley would lash out. And I would be blamed. When she ripped pages from my journal after I won a 5th-grade writing contest, they told me I shouldn't have been bragging. When she accidentally spilled cranberry juice on my white prom dress, they said I shouldn't have flaunted it by hanging it outside my closet. So I learned to keep my head down. I poured everything into school, the one space Ashley didn't care about. I earned straight A's, became editor of the school paper, won an architecture scholarship to Cornell. When the acceptance letter came, I was bursting. But Ashley had a soccer game that day. My parents pushed off celebrating for 2 weeks, and by then, it felt like a footnote. College was my lifeline. At Cornell, I finally met people who saw me. Kylie Johnson became my best friend, the sister I had always deserved. And Jacob Martinez, a civil engineering student with kind eyes, taught me what it felt like to be respected. Loved. Safe. I landed a job right after graduation, a junior position at Harrington Architects, one of Boston's top firms. Kylie and I got an apartment just 20 minutes from my parents' place. And despite everything, I still showed up for Sunday dinners. Some loyalty runs too deep. Ashley? Her path looked different. She'd earned a soccer scholarship to UMass, but she couldn't hold it together. By sophomore year, her grades tanked. She was on academic probation. Then came the fight with the ref, she shoved him during a game and got suspended. By junior year, she'd dropped out and moved back home. Now 26 and seemingly frozen in time, she worked part-time at a sporting goods store and spent her nights drinking with the same high school crowd. No plans. No pressure. My parents never pushed her. Never asked what came next. But as her life stalled, her resentment toward mine only grew. And soon, it would boil over in a way that changed the course of everything. They treated her like she was recovering from some profound injustice, not like someone finally facing the consequences of her own behavior. The event that signaled the unraveling of everything happened 3 months before the final blow. I had brought Jacob to Sunday dinner, a gesture meant to share a piece of my life. But the moment we walked in, Ashley turned icy. Throughout the meal, she tossed out snide comments about pretentious college types and people who think they're better than everyone else. When Jacob, ever polite, asked where she was working, she accidentally knocked over her wine glass. But the way her hand moved? Deliberate. Calculated. And everyone saw it. Later that night, Jacob turned to me and asked, "Has she always been like that with you?" "Like what?" I asked, out of habit. He looked at me gently. "Hazel, she spent the entire evening trying to hurt you. And your parents let it happen." I didn't have an answer. Because he was right. That night was the first time I truly saw my family through someone else's eyes, and what I saw disturbed me. Still, I kept going back. Because no matter how much it hurt, family was family. Or so I thought. December in Boston carries a kind of cold that clings to your bones, the sky darkening before most people finish lunch. 1 week before Christmas, with snow beginning to dust the roads, I drove to my parents' home for our usual Sunday dinner. Holiday lights blinked cheerfully along our street, tiny, colorful lights trying to distract from the chill. But as I pulled into the driveway, that old, familiar knot tightened in my stomach. I had good news, great news, actually. After 18 months at Harrington Architects, I'd been promoted to junior project manager. It was rare for someone at my level to rise so quickly, but my supervisor praised my design work and leadership. The promotion came with a generous raise. For once, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, my family would acknowledge it. The house smelled of pine and roasting turkey. I stomped the snow off my boots and stepped into the warmth of the foyer. My father, Gregory, sat in his usual leather armchair, glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed a document. Without even looking up, he said, "There's my working girl." It was his standard greeting, said with the same tone whether I got a promotion or just showed up. "Your mother and Ashley are upstairs," he added. Something about picking an outfit for a job interview. That caught my attention. Ashley had a job interview? That was news. I shrugged off my coat and placed a bottle of wine on the dining room table, already set with our mother's best china and crystal glasses, an odd choice for a regular Sunday. Then, I tucked small wrapped gifts under the Christmas tree, each one thoughtfully chosen for the people who never really saw me. That's when I heard her, Ashley's heavy steps descending the staircase. She walked into the room scowling, her brown hair pulled back into a tight ponytail that only made the hard edge of her jaw more severe. "Well, look who finally showed up," she sneered. I was 20 minutes early. She wore dark jeans and a forest green sweater that showed off her athletic frame, but her eyes had that familiar, glazed-over look. She'd been drinking. "Merry Christmas to you, too, Ashley," I said, keeping my voice light. "I heard you might have a job interview, that's great news." Before she could answer, our mother swept into the room in a swirl of perfume and pearls, balancing a tray of appetizers like she was still on the pageant stage. "Hazel, darling, perfect timing," she said brightly. "We have something to celebrate tonight." She placed the tray on the coffee table with flair. "Ashley's been accepted into the MBA program at Boston University. Full scholarship." My father stood, beaming. He clapped Ashley on the shoulder like a proud coach. "That's my girl. I always knew you'd find your path." And just like that, I disappeared. The feeling of being invisible washed over me again, as it always did when Ashley was in the spotlight. I swallowed my own news, smiled through the sting, and said, "Congratulations, Ashley. That's amazing. When did you apply?" Ashley narrowed her eyes. "Not everyone needs to announce every little thing they do, Hazel." Before I could respond, my mother chimed in. "Let's open the champagne. This calls for a toast." We moved into the dining room, where my father uncorked a bottle he'd been saving. 4 crystal flutes were filled, and he raised his glass high. To Ashley, he declared. Proof that Williams women always rise to the top. Late bloomers often bloom the brightest. The words hit harder than they should have. Late bloomer? I'd been excelling for years, in college, in my career, in a life I built with no handouts, no second chances. But in this house, none of that seemed to matter. And somewhere deep inside me, something started to crack. Still, I raised my glass with everyone else and took a careful sip, watching Ashley toss back her champagne like it was water. Over dinner, the conversation revolved entirely around her so-called grad school plans. My mother had already started browsing apartments near campus, and my father spoke eagerly about business contacts he could introduce her to. No one asked me a single thing about my job, my life, not even how I'd been. I might as well have been a piece of furniture. As dessert was being served, I excused myself to use the bathroom. On my way down the hall, I passed Ashley's childhood bedroom, now her full-time space again. The door was slightly open. A crumpled sheet of paper in her trash bin caught my eye. I don't normally snoop, but something about it pulled me in. I stepped closer. It was a letter from Boston University, but not an acceptance. A rejection, dated 2 weeks ago. Incomplete application. Missing academic prerequisites. My chest tightened. She lied. And either my parents were in on it, or they were blindly playing along. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding. What was I supposed to do with this? When I returned to the table, Ashley was watching me, her eyes sharp, narrowed, as if she already knew I'd seen it. I said nothing. Just took my seat and kept my focus on the untouched chocolate mousse in front of me. So, Hazel, my father said suddenly, with faux interest. Anything new on your end? Still drawing buildings? His tone made it sound like I was doodling in a notebook, not working on million-dollar projects. Before I could answer, Ashley cut in. Probably just the same old boring stuff. Not everyone gets to make bold life changes. It was her third glass of wine, and her words were getting heavier. Something in me snapped. Years of being dismissed, minimized, talked over, it all gathered in that moment. Actually, I said, calm but firm, I was promoted to junior project manager this week. Youngest one in my firm's history. Silence. Brief, but thick. Well, that's nice, dear, my mother said after a pause, her tone flat. Anyone want more mousse? Ashley's face darkened. You always have to one-up everyone, don't you, Hazel? Can't let anyone else have the spotlight, not even for one dinner. Language, Ashley, my mother scolded, gently, more for show than correction. I tried to stay composed. I just thought. Since we were sharing good news? The difference, Ashley snapped, voice rising, is that my news matters. Your little promotion is just more of the same perfect Hazel routine. I took a breath. My hands were shaking. Is it really good news though, Ashley? I said quietly. Because I saw the rejection letter in your trash. The room fell dead silent. My father's fork clattered against his plate. My mother's smile froze. Ashley stood so fast her chair hit the floor behind her with a loud thud. You went through my stuff, she shouted. You little sneak. I didn't go through anything, I said, still seated. I saw it when I walked by. It was right there. My father turned to her, confused. Ashley, what's she talking about? Ashley ignored him completely, all her fury focused on me. You just can't stand that for once this family was proud of me. That for one moment, it wasn't about you. I stood, trying to keep the air from splitting. I don't care about being celebrated, Ashley. I care about the truth. Why lie about something like this? What happened next was a blur. Ashley lunged across the table. Wine glasses tipped over, red spilling like blood across my mother's heirloom lace tablecloth. Her face twisted into something unrecognizable as she came at me. You ruined everything, she screamed, grabbing me by the shoulders and shoving me backward. I stumbled into the china cabinet, my lower back catching painfully against the edge. Ashley, stop. I gasped, more stunned than hurt. She had never attacked me like this in front of our parents. My father finally stood, dropping his napkin to the floor. Girls. That's enough. But Ashley wasn't finished. She came at me again, fists flying, wild and blind. I threw up my arms, shielding my face just as one of her punches caught my forearm. A sharp, hot pain shot through me. How dare you embarrass me, she yelled, each word a hammer. You think you're so much better than me. I tried to block her swings, catching her wrists when I could. Ashley, please. I wasn't trying to humiliate you, I just wanted the truth. My mother hovered nearby, hands fluttering like torn paper. Girls, please. Someone might hear. The neighbors. That was her worry. Not the bruises. Not the violence. Not her oldest daughter attacking the middle child. The neighbors might hear. The fight spilled into the living room as I backed away, desperate to put space between us. Ashley followed, unrelenting. My back hit the fireplace mantel. I felt something solid dig into my spine, the framed family photos, the brass horse statue my father gave my mother for their 20th anniversary, the delicate crystal clock we were never allowed to touch. All of it behind me. All of it threatening to shatter. Ashley saw the opening and seized it. Her hand closed around the brass statue. In that instant, everything slowed. I saw the weight of it in her grip, the way her arm arced back, the vacant fury in her eyes that no longer held even a trace of sisterly recognition. Ashley, no! I screamed, trying to twist away. The brass horse slammed into my rib cage. The sound of the impact echoed through the room like a gunshot. For a moment there was just pressure, then a sharp, unmistakable crack that I felt more than heard. Pain ignited across my side, white-hot, blinding, stealing both my breath and vision. My legs buckled. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, unable to stay upright. Every breath was a knife, slicing deeper with each inhale. I curled in on myself instinctively, cradling the injury. Oh my God, I heard my mother gasp. Through watery eyes, I looked up to see Ashley still standing over me, statue in hand. For a split second, she looked stunned, like she couldn't quite process what she'd done. But just as quickly, her face hardened. That's what you get, she said, voice flat. Cold. I tried to speak, but all I could manage was a shallow, wheezing gasp. The pain was spreading, pulsing outward from my ribs to the rest of my body. Breathing was becoming harder by the second. I was sure something was broken. And terrified it was serious. Finally, my father stepped forward. He gently pried the statue from Ashley's fingers and placed it on the coffee table. That's enough, Ashley. Go cool off. That's enough. Not what the hell is wrong with you? Not Hazel needs help. Just a casual dismissal, as if she'd taken a prank too far. My mother knelt beside me, hands fluttering uselessly above my body. Hazel, you're overreacting. Take some deep breaths. I tried. The agony that followed nearly knocked me unconscious. My vision darkened with spots. I think, my rib is broken, I gasped. I need a hospital. My parents exchanged a glance, a silent conversation honed from decades of marriage. My father exhaled, annoyed. Don't be dramatic, Hazel. It's probably just bruised. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had just been assaulted, and they were treating it like I had stubbed my toe. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone in my pocket. I need to call an ambulance, I whispered. Every word cost me. My mother's hand snapped out, surprisingly quick. She snatched the phone from my grip. Don't call the cops, Hazel. You'll ruin her life. I stared up at her, stunned. She broke my rib. My mother actually laughed. A dry, humorless sound. It's just a rib. You'll heal. Ashley is finally getting back on track. An assault charge would destroy her future. What about my future? I choked out, pain flaring again. I felt something warm on my side. I shifted my hand, blood. I held up my fingertips. See? I'm bleeding internally. My father rolled his eyes. For God's sake, Hazel. Always the drama queen. It's probably just a scratch. Across the room, Ashley stood with arms crossed, glaring. There was no remorse. Only thinly veiled irritation, and maybe, underneath that, a flicker of smug satisfaction. And in that moment, it clicked. These people, this family I had spent my life trying to impress, to win over, would never choose me. Not over Ashley. Not even now. With sheer willpower and the help of the sofa, I began to pull myself upright. Waves of dizziness crashed over me, but I gritted my teeth and forced myself to stand. Each movement sent fresh shocks of pain through my body, but I refused to let it stop me. Give me my phone, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Not until you calm down and think rationally, my mother said, slipping it into her pocket. Rationally? My voice rose despite the pain. She assaulted me. With a weapon. My father stepped between us. Keep your voice down. The neighbors will hear. The neighbors. Their precious image. I looked at them, at each of their faces, and finally saw it for what it was, not concern. Not love. Just inconvenience. Just shame. Fine, I said softly. Keep the phone. I turned and staggered toward the foyer, every step a fresh trial. No one offered to help as I wrestled myself into my coat. Lifting my arms nearly caused me to black out. I gritted my teeth and pushed through. Where do you think you're going? My father barked. Hose, I tried to say, breath catching in my throat. Hospital. This is ridiculous, my mother muttered. You're going to embarrass the family. Over nothing. I didn't reply. My only focus was the door. I opened it. Cold December air rushed in. Behind me, Ashley's voice cut through the silence. Drama queen. I didn't look back. Navigating the porch steps was a battle. My vision swam. The pain was so intense I had to stop twice just to breathe. Somehow, I made it to the car. Somehow, I got the door open, slid into the driver's seat. Driving myself to the hospital with a broken rib was probably a terrible idea. But it was the only option I had. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. No one stood at the door. No one watched me leave. No one cared. The ER was overflowing, holiday injuries, winter colds, chaos everywhere. I waited, hunched in a cheap plastic chair, for 45 unbearable minutes. By the time a triage nurse noticed my color and labored breathing, I was barely coherent. Once I explained what happened, everything changed. They rushed me back for tests. After the x-rays, a doctor confirmed what I already knew. 2 broken ribs. Internal bruising. A hair's breadth from a punctured lung. His name tag read Dr. Wilson. The good news, he said, is there's no puncture to your lung, though it was a close call. Can I ask how this happened? I hesitated. I fell against something hard. Dr. Wilson's expression remained professional, but the doubt in his eyes was unmistakable. The impact point, he said carefully, is more consistent with blunt force trauma than a simple fall. A nurse entered the room, Jessica, her badge red. She looked to be in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She brought supplies to clean and dress the small wound where the skin had split. As the doctor stepped out, Jessica glanced at me, her voice low. Domestic situation? I didn't answer at first. Her hands worked gently, methodically, despite the directness of the question. We see a lot of this, she added softly. Especially around the holidays. Family tensions can turn volatile. I swallowed hard. My sister, I admitted. She hit me. With a brass statue. Jessica didn't flinch. Just nodded, without judgment. And your family? What did they do? The tears I'd been holding back since leaving the house finally broke free. They told me not to call the police, I whispered. Said it would ruin her life. My mom actually laughed when I told them I thought my rib was broken. Jessica's hand stilled for the briefest moment before she resumed bandaging. I'm required to ask, would you like to file a report? We can have an officer come speak with you. The thought of pressing charges against Ashley sent a surge of emotion crashing over me. Guilt. Fear. Confusion. Years of family conditioning made the answer stick in my throat. I don't know, I admitted. That's okay, Jessica said gently. You don't have to decide right now. She handed me a small card, a list of support resources for abuse victims. This might not feel like domestic abuse, she continued, because it's your sister, not a partner. But violence is violence. And family abuse follows the same patterns. Dr. Wilson returned a moment later, holding my discharge papers and a prescription. No driving for at least 24 hours after taking these pain meds, he cautioned. Do you have someone who can pick you up? My phone was still with my mother, so I used the hospitals to call Kylie. She arrived half an hour later, her expression tight with concern. What the hell happened? She asked, helping me into the car. I told her everything during the drive to her apartment. By the time we arrived, she was furious. Hazel, this is not okay. Your sister is dangerous. And your parents, they're enabling her. They're still my family, I said quietly, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Family doesn't break your bones and laugh about it, Kylie shot back, guiding me into her guest room. You're staying here until you're fully recovered. No arguments. Over the next few days, the replacement phone Kylie got for me buzzed constantly with messages from my parents and Ashley. Not a single one contained an apology. From my mother. I hope you're satisfied with the drama you've caused. Your father and I had to cancel brunch with the Andersons because of this nonsense. From my father. This family has always handled things privately. Your behavior was inappropriate and childish. And from Ashley. If you tell anyone what happened, you'll regret it. Some sister you are. I showed Kylie the messages. She read them, then muttered a long string of expletives that would have made my mother faint. They're not even asking if you're okay, she said. Unbelievable. Jacob came by that evening after work. The moment he saw me, the concern in his eyes was immediate, sincere in a way I hadn't felt from my own parents. You need to file a police report, Hazel, he said gently. That was assault. She could have killed you if she hit a few inches higher. I know, I whispered. But it's complicated. It's really not, he said, calm but firm. If I had done that to you, if a boyfriend had, would you be debating whether to report it? His words struck something deep. Of course I'd report a romantic partner who'd done that. So why was family different? The next morning, I called my supervisor and asked for 2 weeks of medical leave. I kept the explanation vague, just a family situation. She didn't pry. She offered support. Reassurance. The contrast to my parents was jarring. As the physical pain faded slowly, a different kind of ache took its place, an emotional reckoning. With distance, I started seeing patterns I'd been too close to recognize before. Ashley's outbursts, always dismissed. My achievements, consistently minimized. The way I was expected to tolerate, to shrink, to keep the peace, even if it broke me. My parents had always enabled Ashley's worst behaviors while holding me to impossible standards. What disturbed me most was realizing just how deeply I had accepted it, how I had normalized their treatment of me. I had come to believe this was just how families worked. I never thought to question it. One night, unable to sleep because of the throbbing pain in my side, I began scrolling through old photos on my phone. Vacations, holidays, graduations, moments that were supposed to be joyful. And yet, in image after image, the pattern was unmistakable. Ashley, always at the center. Me, tucked at the edges. Smiling, but never quite convincingly. Everyone else looked genuinely happy. I looked like I was trying to be. Was this what family meant? People who hurt you, then made you feel guilty for being hurt? As Christmas approached, normally a time I would have been deeply involved in baking, decorating, orchestrating the schedule, I remained at Kylie's apartment. Healing. Not just my body, but something deeper. Something long ignored. Then came the text from my parents. You're welcome to join us for Christmas dinner, if you're ready to move past this unfortunate incident. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had actually happened. Just an invitation to pretend. I didn't reply. For the first time in 28 years, I spent Christmas away from my family. Instead, Kylie, Jacob, and a few close friends gathered at her place. We exchanged small, thoughtful gifts, made lasagna instead of turkey, and watched holiday movies. Despite everything, the injury, the rupture with my family, it was the most peaceful Christmas I could remember. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I would no longer tolerate treatment that diminished who I was. My rib would heal, but my relationship with my family couldn't, not unless they were willing to face what had happened and do the work to change. It was time to break the cycle. Even if that meant breaking ties. The 2 weeks after Christmas passed in a haze of recovery and quiet revelations. Messages from my parents came in sporadically, each one skillfully dodging any responsibility while implying that I was the one overreacting. From my mother. Your absence at the Hendersons' New Year's party was noticed. People are asking questions. This silent treatment is very immature. From my father. This has gone on long enough. Hazel, your sister made a mistake in the heat of the moment. It's time to forgive and forget. Ashley sent just one. I hope you're happy with the mess you've created. Mom cried at dinner because you weren't there. Each message only confirmed what I was slowly coming to understand. In their version of events, I was the problem, not the violence, not the years of favoritism, not the lies. Just me, refusing to stay quiet, to play the role I'd always been assigned. On January 2nd, I had my first session with Dr. Martinez, a therapist Kylie had recommended. Her office was warm and inviting. Potted plants on every surface, soft art on the walls, a calm that settled over me the moment I walked in. Tell me why you're here, Hazel, she said once we were seated. I began by recounting the incident with Ashley. But soon, without meaning to, I found myself unraveling years of minimized emotions and dismissed concerns. Things I hadn't planned to talk about tumbled out. Dr. Martinez listened with steady focus, occasionally nodding or asking a gentle question to guide me deeper. When I finally ran out of words, she said, what you're describing is a classic family system, often seen in households with addiction, trauma, or personality disorders. Over time, the roles become fixed, the scapegoat, the golden child, the enablers. Which am I? I asked, though I already knew. It sounds like you've been positioned as the scapegoat. The one who carries the blame, the tension, the consequences. Your sister appears to be the golden child. The one who can do no wrong, even when the evidence says otherwise. Hearing it spoken aloud was both validating and heartbreaking. So, it's not normal? The way they treat me? Dr. Martinez shook her head without hesitation. No, Hazel. It is not normal, or healthy, to be physically attacked by a family member and then blamed for the consequences. It is not okay for parents to prioritize one child's future over another child's safety. She gave me an assignment: start documenting the family dynamics, past and present. That night, I dug through old journals I had kept since middle school. The entries stunned me. Page after page of pain I had learned to downplay. April 15, 2006. Ashley threw my science project in the pool. She was mad I got an A. Mom said I should have kept it at school, that I was showing off. November 22, 2011. Thanksgiving. Ashley got drunk and called me a pretentious bitch in front of everyone when I mentioned my college applications. Later, Dad said I should have known better, that I was making her feel bad about dropping out. Over and over again, the pattern repeated. Ashley's behavior excused. Mine scrutinized. Her feelings sacred. Mine irrelevant. For the first time I saw it clearly. The common thread wasn't bad luck or isolated incidents. The common thread was Ashley. And the family who had always protected her at my expense. My needs had always come second. Or not at all. In the midst of that realization, during a stretch of quiet reflection, my Aunt Laura, my mother's estranged sister, reached out to me over social media. We hadn't spoken in years. My parents had dismissed her as troubled back when I was a teenager, and that was the end of it, or so I thought. I heard through the grapevine what happened, she wrote. History has a way of repeating itself in this family. I'm afraid you're not alone. Intrigued, I arranged to meet her at a cafe halfway between Boston and Providence, where she now lived. Despite the years apart, I recognized her the moment I walked in. She looked like a softer version of my mother, the same bone structure, but kind eyes, and none of the rigid, performative posture I had grown up with. Over coffee, she said, "Your mother and I haven't spoken in 15 years. Why?" I asked, genuinely unsure. My parents had never offered an explanation, only vague references to Laura's issues. She laughed, dry and without humor. The issue was that I finally stood up to your grandmother. Who, by the way, was exactly like your mother is now, controlling, manipulative, playing favorites. Gaslighting anyone who questioned the story she told about our family. She stirred her coffee slowly. Your mother was the golden child. I was the scapegoat. Sound familiar? It was like looking into a version of my own possible future, one where someone had made it out. Laura had walked away from the same toxic system that still had its grip on me. How did you do it? I asked. How did you break away? With difficulty, she admitted. There were years of guilt. Years of second-guessing. But eventually, I realized something simple and true: family shouldn't hurt this much. Real love doesn't demand you make yourself small, or accept abuse. As January wore on, I continued therapy with Dr. Martinez, spoke with Laura regularly, and began diving into research on family dysfunction and emotional abuse. Books like Toxic Parents and Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents described my life so precisely, it felt like someone had been watching us. I also met with Catherine Chin, a lawyer who specialized in family law and protective orders. During our consultation, she listened carefully and then said, "Based on what you've described, the physical assault with a weapon, the threatening message, the ongoing pattern, you have solid grounds for a protective order against your sister." "I'm not sure I want to go that far," I said, still wavering. Taking legal action against Ashley felt unthinkable, even after everything. "You don't have to decide now," she assured me. "But it's important that you understand your rights. No one, family or not, has the right to physically harm you." As my broken rib began to mend, the emotional unraveling only intensified. I started reconnecting with old friends, people I had drifted from during college and the chaos that followed. To my surprise, many of them had always sensed something was wrong. "Your sister was always so mean to you," my childhood friend Tessa said during a long phone call. "We all saw it. But you seemed to think it was normal." By the end of January, I had something I'd never had before, a support system that felt like actual family. Kylie and Jacob remained constant. Friends, both old and new, reached out. Colleagues checked in. Aunt Laura called every few days to offer reassurance, empathy, and the kind of wisdom only someone who had lived it could offer. Then came the decision I had been building toward. With Dr. Martinez's help, I drafted a letter addressed to my parents and Ashley. It laid out the behaviors I would no longer accept, the accountability I needed, and the changes that would be necessary if there was to be any relationship going forward. The final paragraph read, "I love you. But I love myself more than I ever have before, and too much to continue accepting treatment that diminishes my worth and threatens my well-being. The choice is yours: acknowledge the harm, commit to change, or accept that our relationship will fundamentally shift." Before sending it, I gathered my evidence: medical records of my injury, photographs of the bruising, screenshots of their messages, the cold dismissals, the threats, the guilt trips, and journal entries spanning years, each one a piece of a pattern I could no longer unsee. Armed with truth, and for the first time, clarity, I prepared for what would be the hardest confrontation of my life. February arrived wrapped in crystalline cold, the kind that made my still healing rib ache with each breath. 3 weeks had passed since I sent the letter. The initial response had been silence. Then came the messages, terse and urgent. "Call us immediately. We need to discuss this nonsense in person." Eventually, I agreed to meet. A Sunday afternoon, the same time slot once reserved for our family dinners. Only this time I wouldn't be walking in unprepared. Or alone. Kylie drove me to my parents' house, pulling up right in front instead of parking in the driveway. "I'll be right here," she said, squeezing my hand. "If you're not out in an hour, or if you text me the word now, I'm coming in to get you." In my tote bag, copies of medical records, screenshots of their messages, and a small digital recorder. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state. So I planned to inform them immediately that the conversation was being recorded. The walk to the front door felt like moving through time, stepping back into a place I knew, but no longer belonged to. I noticed things I hadn't seen before: the immaculate lawn despite winter, the sterile, curated decor, the complete absence of warmth or personality. My mother opened the door before I could knock. "Finally," she said, as if I were late, even though I had arrived exactly on time. "Everyone's waiting in the living room." I followed her down the hall, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out my thoughts. My father was in his usual chair, unread book in hand, glasses perched low on his nose. Ashley was spread across the sofa, arms folded tight across her chest. Neither stood to greet me. I remained standing. When my mother gestured toward an empty chair, I didn't move. "Before we begin," I said calmly, "I need to let you know, I'll be recording this conversation. For my protection." I placed the recorder on the coffee table and pressed the red button, clearly visible. "By continuing this conversation," I said calmly, "you consent to being recorded." My father's eyebrows lifted. "Is that really necessary?" "This is a private family matter." "It is necessary," I replied simply. Ashley rolled her eyes. "Always with the drama." I took a deep breath, grounding myself before I spoke. "I asked for this meeting to give you a chance to hear me directly. The letter I sent outlined my experience, the patterns in our family dynamic that led to Ashley physically assaulting me and breaking my rib." "And your response to that assault?" I asked, looking at each of them. "It was an accident," my mother cut in quickly. "You provoked her by snooping through her things." "I didn't snoop. I found a discarded letter in an open trash can," I said, keeping my tone measured. "But even if I had, does that justify breaking someone's rib?" "Of course not," my father said, removing his glasses. "But families have conflicts. Sometimes they get out of hand. What matters is that we move past it and return to normal. That's why I'm here," I continued. "To clarify what normal can and cannot include from this point forward." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "These are my hospital records," I said, laying the documents on the table. "X-rays showing the broken rib. Doctor's notes indicating the injury is consistent with blunt force trauma, not an accident." No one reached for them. "You went to the hospital?" my mother asked, surprised. "I thought you were just trying to get attention." Her words confirmed everything I had come to understand in recent weeks. "I had a fractured rib and internal bleeding," I said evenly. "It required medical care." Ashley finally spoke. Her voice was cold and sharp. So what do you want? Money for the hospital bill? Fine. I'll pay it if it'll shut you up. What I want, I said, is acknowledgement. Not just for the assault, but for the years that led up to it. The pattern of your aggression being minimized. The way our family has consistently prioritized your comfort over my safety. My father leaned forward, slipping into the familiar posture of a man about to negotiate terms. Hazel, every family has its problems. You've always been sensitive. You take things personally. Ashley has her own challenges. She's working on them. What challenges would those be? I asked. The lying about graduate school? The drinking? The violence? That's enough, my mother snapped. We did not raise you to speak to us this way. No, I said. You raised me to accept mistreatment as love. To believe my safety and emotions were less important than keeping up appearances or shielding Ashley from consequences. Ashley stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this psychobabble. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to make me look bad. For succeeding in school? For building a life? For expecting not to be assaulted in the home I grew up in? I asked, voice steady even as emotion churned inside. You think you're better than everyone, she hissed. Miss Perfect with her fancy job and degree. Some of us have real problems. What problems, Ashley? I asked, staring at her. You had every opportunity, financial support, scholarships, endless second chances. What's held you back other than your own choices? She stepped toward me, fists clenched. See? Always judging me. You have no idea what it's like living in your shadow. My father moved quickly, placing himself between us. That's enough, Ashley. Sit down. For once, she listened. But her glare didn't waver. Hazel, my father said, adjusting his tone. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here? What's your endgame? It was a fair question, one I had prepared for. I want 3 things, I said clearly. First, an acknowledgement of what happened. Not the watered-down version you've created. Second, Ashley needs professional help for her anger and alcohol use. Third, if we're to have any relationship going forward, certain boundaries must be respected. My mother scoffed. This is absurd. What's next, a formal apology ceremony? Actually, I said, a sincere apology would be appropriate. But I'm not holding my breath. And if we say no? My father asked, voice low and clipped. They're not demands, I said. They're conditions. For my continued presence in this family. If you can't meet them, I will protect myself by maintaining distance. So you're threatening to cut us off? My mother's voice rose, high-pitched with disbelief. Over one little incident? It wasn't one incident, I replied. It was the culmination of a lifetime of incidents, each one dismissed, excused, or ignored. Just like you're doing now. So that's it? Ashley cut in. Do what you say, or you'll abandon your family. Real mature, Hazel, my father said, his voice dripping with disdain. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied. I'm establishing boundaries, ones that are necessary for my well-being. I took another deep breath. There's one more thing you need to know. If these conditions aren't met, I'll be filing a police report for the assault. The room erupted. You wouldn't dare, Ashley spat. My mother gasped, scandalized. After everything we've done for you. You're out of line, my father boomed. His face darkened, voice thick with rage. Ashley said nothing. She just stared, her expression locked somewhere between disbelief and fury. I don't want to take that step, I said, once the shouting had settled into tense silence. But I need you to understand, what happened wasn't minor. It wasn't a misunderstanding. And I will no longer pretend it was, just to preserve a version of family that doesn't actually exist. My father's expression shifted, not to empathy, but calculation. It was the same look I'd seen during business meetings that weren't going his way. If you go through with this, he said coldly, you can consider yourself cut off. Financially. Emotionally. In every way. I tilted my head slightly. Is that a threat, Dad? It's a fact, he snapped. Blood is thicker than water, Hazel. Loyalty to family comes before all else. I gave a small, sad smile. The full quote is actually, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the opposite of how you're using it. The bonds we choose can be stronger than the ones we're born into. Don't lecture me about sayings, he snapped. The point stands. If you go down this vindictive path, you're no longer part of this family. I looked at each of them. My father's face burned with self-righteous fury. My mother's mouth was pressed into a thin, unforgiving line. Ashley looked victorious, as if she had finally won some invisible battle, completely untouched by the seriousness of what she had done. And in that moment, I knew, there would be no acknowledgement. No accountability. No change. I understand, I said quietly, gathering the folder of documents and turning off the recorder. I truly hoped this conversation would go differently. So did we, my mother said coldly. I never imagined a daughter of mine would betray her family this way. I'm not betraying anyone, I said, standing. I'm refusing to be a victim. I paused at the door. I'm still open to reconciliation. But the conditions I outlined still stand. Don't hold your breath, Ashley called after me. As I stepped outside, a rush of cold air hit my face, and with it, a strange, bittersweet clarity. I felt both grief and release. The family I had clung to, the version I had so desperately hoped for, was gone. But maybe, just maybe, it had never truly existed at all. Kylie was waiting in the car, just like she'd promised. One look at my face told her everything. Home? She asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak through the tight ache in my throat. That evening, with Kylie and Jacob by my side, I filed a police report detailing the assault. The responding officer was calm, respectful, and thorough. He took my statement, photographed the fading bruises, and listened without judgment. Family violence cases are always complicated, he said gently. But assault is still assault, no matter who the perpetrator is. I knew what this would cost. My parents would follow through on their threats. There would be silence. Estrangement. A version of the story would be passed around the extended family, one in which I was ungrateful, dramatic, vindictive. There would be holidays with an empty chair, milestones met without acknowledgement. I would be painted as the villain. But as I signed my name on the official statement, something shifted inside me, subtle but irreversible. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just standing up to my sister, or even my parents. I was standing up to the generational dysfunction that had shaped us all. I was breaking the cycle, even if it meant breaking ties. 6 months passed. Summer arrived in Boston, and with it, new growth, literal and emotional. My rib had healed completely. Only the occasional twinge during yoga or heavy lifting reminded me of that winter night. As for Ashley, the legal consequences were relatively mild. Because she had no prior record and I was willing to accept a plea agreement, she was sentenced to 100 hours of community service and mandatory anger management. No jail time. No permanent record if she met the terms. My parents had done exactly what they said they would, no contact. No birthday call. No reply to the brief email I sent, letting them know I remained open to communication, if and only if they were willing to acknowledge boundaries and repair. There was only silence. But in that silence, something else bloomed. Peace. Mutual acquaintances began reaching out. They'd heard I had suffered some kind of breakdown, that I was spreading lies about the family. That narrative stung, of course. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, grieving not just the loss of my family, but the version of them I had always hoped for. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that this grief was not only normal, but necessary. You're mourning 2 losses, she said during one of our bi-weekly sessions. what was real, and what was possible. Let yourself feel the pain. But don't confuse grief with regret. You didn't make the wrong choice. And slowly, amidst the mourning, something surprising began to grow: space. Without the constant drain of trying to earn approval from people unwilling, or unable, to give it freely, I discovered a reserve of emotional energy I'd never known I had. At work, I channeled that energy into creative projects, developing designs that drew attention from senior partners and clients alike. Just 3 months after that final confrontation with my family, I was promoted again, this time to full project manager, with my own team to lead. My apartment, once just a place to sleep between work and family obligations, became a sanctuary. I painted the walls in colors that made me smile, hung artwork that spoke to me, not just to a design trend, and filled bookshelves with titles my mother would have labeled too intellectual, or my father too impractical. Most significantly, my relationships deepened and expanded. Kylie remained my steady, unshakable support. But I was no longer leaning solely on her for connection. I rekindled old friendships, accepted invitations I once would have declined out of guilt or obligation. I allowed joy to take up space in my life. Jacob and I grew closer through the crucible of those difficult months. He never tried to fix me, never pushed for resolution. He stood beside me, offering quiet, unwavering support. As summer neared, our bond shifted into something new, a partnership built on mutual care, respect, and genuine affection. A kind of love I had never believed was possible. Aunt Laura became a regular presence, visiting from Providence monthly, calling every week. Through her, I reconnected with cousins I had barely known, relatives my parents had kept us separate from for years. Your mother and grandmother passed down the same patterns, Laura told me once during a visit. But you and I were breaking that cycle. One of the most unexpected gifts came through a support group Laura recommended, for adult survivors of family abuse. Twice a month, I sat in a circle of men and women whose stories echoed my own. Some had endured violence far worse than mine. Others had lived under the slow erosion of subtle psychological manipulation. But all of us understood the unique pain of being harmed by those who were supposed to keep us safe. Family abuse is especially damaging, said Marcus, the group facilitator. It fractures our understanding of love itself. But recognizing and naming it, that's the first step to reclaiming your right to healthy relationships. Through those connections, I began to build what therapists call chosen family, people bound not by blood, but by mutual care, respect, and trust. We celebrated holidays together, helped each other through challenges, created traditions untouched by old pain. In May, Ashley completed her court-mandated anger management program. Her counselor reached out to ask if I'd be willing to participate in a mediated conversation, part of her recovery process. After careful thought, and discussions with Dr. Martinez, I agreed. We met in a neutral space, a counseling center conference room, with Ashley's therapist and a trained mediator present. Jacob came with me, waiting just outside the room. Ashley looked different, thinner, yes, but also more grounded. Her posture was less defensive. Her eyes, clearer than I'd seen in years. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, the first words she'd spoken to me since that night. The conversation that followed was difficult. But it was honest. Ashley didn't make excuses. She didn't deflect or minimize. She acknowledged the choices she had made and the pattern that had led to the assault. "I was jealous of you," she admitted. "Always. You seemed to know who you were, what you wanted. I was flailing, and I hated you for being steady when I wasn't. Instead of facing that, I turned it into rage. And I took it out on you. I'm so sorry. I didn't offer forgiveness, not yet. That, I explained, would have to be earned over time through consistent change, not words alone. But I did thank her for her honesty. I hope this is the beginning of something healthier for you," I said as we wrapped up. "Whatever happens between us, I want you to be well." My parents, on the other hand, remained unmoved. Through extended family, I learned they were still telling people they had lost a daughter to mental illness. That version of the story hurt, but it no longer held power over me. By midsummer, I had gained a new understanding of what family, healing, and worth truly meant. I knew now that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it's brave. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, or subjecting yourself to further harm. That real love doesn't ask you to shrink or silence your pain to maintain peace. The broken rib had long since mended. But like bones often do, it healed stronger at the fracture point. And so had I. Now, as I sit by my office window, looking out at the Boston skyline, I feel a quiet sense of gratitude, not for the abuse, not for the pain, but for the awakening it brought. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my family of origin. The door remains cracked, should they choose to approach it with accountability and respect. But I'm no longer waiting beside that door, holding my breath for validation that may never come. Instead, I am living, fully and presently, surrounded by people who see me clearly, love me freely, and value me simply for who I am. I've learned that family isn't defined by genetics. It's defined by love. By safety. By mutual care. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates, please know, you are not alone. Your experience is real. Your feelings are valid. And your right to safety and respect is not up for negotiation. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tell the truth. Even if the truth fractures relationships that were never whole to begin with. I'd love to hear your stories of healing and resilience in the comments below. Have you had to set difficult boundaries with family? What helped you find the strength to stand in your truth? Please like and subscribe if this message resonates, and share it with someone who might need to hear, you deserve better. Thank you for listening to my story.